Welcome to this episode of Abide in Me, How Jesus Models Secure Attachment with God. This series is a survey of the Gospel of Mark, looking for how Jesus models what is now called secure attachment, which is the physiological, emotional, cognitive, and spiritual experience of what is often called salvation or regeneration or being conjoined with God or enlightenment, individuation, even becoming spiritual. Through the series, we will discover the benefits of becoming securely attached with God, which is the transformation of one's life into one of joy and satisfaction.
Our premise continues that Jesus' words and actions are manifesting his psychological development of a secure attachment with his Father, his apostles, with other people. He models how we can achieve a view of ourselves that is healthy, interdependent, loving, and secure in our relationship with God and other people. We now come to the last week of Jesus' time on earth, and he is daily teaching in the temple in Jerusalem. He is actively preparing for his own death and resurrection. There are no healing miracles or uplifting stories really left, least that illustrate secure attachment. We come to chapter 12, which is entirely stories that challenge the religious leaders. Every argument against Jesus and his teaching that one of them puts forward becomes an opportunity for Jesus to reveal the spiritual reality hidden underneath their superficial religiosity. He challenges the status quo by revealing an authentic spirituality. Jesus even demonstrates that there is deep spirituality in the ancient text of the Hebrew scriptures that they are relying upon. How does Jesus' model of an authentic, secure life appear in these stories? Are we to be proactive in addressing societal ills? Are we supposed to call out our leaders for their ineptitude, hypocrisy, or corruption? Backing up a bit, it may be key to notice that Jesus is never making theological arguments. He is true to his mission that he's not here to change the political civil structure that is reigning on the earth. Rather, he is calling out fear-based or defensive or superficial living. He is calling out that shallow life that grasps for control that then ends up being selfish and power-hungry and manipulative. One can even do evil coming from that fear-based life, all in the name of preserving the status quo, which is held to be religiously pure and the standard of goodness. That's what Jesus is challenging. He's introducing a worldview, a spiritual attitude, and he's actually, we believe, changing people's minds so that they can understand and grasp and adopt this way of being that is founded in spiritual, inner, interdependent, trusting, securely attached source of living, not just the law. Jesus is telling us not so much that we have to be morally or civilly proactive, although he certainly is, but that we have to first discover and adopt an attitude of internally generated trust in and love for our Creator, our higher power, the source, and so our fellow human beings. And marvelously, we are not blind or merely instinctual participants in this life. God has given us this human ability to observe ourselves and to see all of our life and be engaged in our own life so that we have a sense of owning it, so that we see it in the context of all existence. We can experience the greatest degree of freedom, joy, and satisfaction We can live with and in and from an attitude of abundance and grace and peace and joy, satisfaction, all because God created this life and because we are participating in the fruitfulness of that garden. So that's the first incident in Mark chapter 12, when the religious leaders get a story that Jesus tells about some evil tenant farmers who first kill the rent collectors and then finally are killed by the owner. That story is about them. The lesson is for us that we are blessed with abundance and joy and satisfaction whenever we reap the benefits of this life, not natural life, but spiritual life, without trying to own it or to be in control of that life. To be secure in our relationship with God and other people means that we do not need to be in control of the process. We do not need to be in charge of the productivity. We do not need to be in control of the results. We are not overwhelmed by fear when all our efforts go, rather, into cultivating a trust that God is caring for our spiritual, eternal lives, regardless of what's happening to us in this time and space. We all have experienced, indeed, we are experiencing real challenges to this attitude, to this way of being. It seems to be perennial. It was happening 2,000 years ago, and it's still happening today. The shadow of the blessing of being given a role in God's life is the possibility of taking it on as our own. For instance, I often worry about the welfare of my children. All good parents do. All attentive parents do. So I might seek to extend my control of their actions and choices even into their adulthood, because I think that's going to keep them safe. I'm right. I can keep them safe, right? However, that harms, may even kill their own ownership of their part in God's life. My child will eventually get that, feel that I'm trying to control their lives, and they will reject this anxiously insecure reach I'm making, and in so doing, reject me. So our task is to continue the work that Jesus has been modeling. I welcome his care for me, offering the bounty of my life, the work, the creative work I've done, to God, to other people, with joy and freedom, because I know, I'm convinced, I'm living as if God is the actual owner of that life. I live as though I'm going to live forever and have abundance and thrive in interdependence with God and other people. And I can do this because I've cultivated a secure attachment with God and other people. That the work of my whole life, that life within, that which infills my passion for creativity and productivity, will endure season to season as I welcome the messengers of God, reminding me of his ownership of life. I remember myself while doing my mindfulness practice. I raise my view, expecting to see goodness in others. I find resolution when I discover again the non-duality of mercy and justice. This is God living in my life, whom I welcome every time I realize a new harvest. Next, the gospel reports that two other factions of the leadership team up to discredit him. The Herodians want Jesus to refuse to pay taxes so that he could be arrested and executed by the Romans, right? The Pharisees want Jesus to agree to pay the occupiers' taxes so that he would then lose all his followers and they could have him arrested and executed. This may be familiar to us even today, two opposing factions working together to silence a mutually annoying voice. Jesus was indeed upsetting the status quo, and leaders of every faction wanted him gone. Once again, though, my focus is not so much explaining Jesus' teaching about our civil and sacred duties, I see Jesus demonstrating the practice of cultivating an open mind and heart, of considering a new view. This has been expressed by many wise people from ancient times till now. I'm reminded of that Albert Einstein is reported to have said, "We cannot solve our problems with the same thinking we used to create them." Our task is to notice the trap of a mind divided by dualistic either-or thinking. We can practice noticing when we feel caught in a dilemma or agonizing over a choice which feels like between two evils. Such a moment is an opportunity, Jesus shows us here, to remember that we are on the way and that trust brings resolution and peace, and that God is looking only for our success and loving us and rescuing us and giving us all that we possibly need to live eternally fulfilled and happy lives. I want to discover practices that will teach my mind and my body to live this way. So when Jesus is asked whether he's going to pay taxes or not, he rises above the circumstance and he says, "Give me the coin." He sees Caesar's face on the coin, and he says, this then belongs to Caesar. The human mind makes meaning. The human mind is curious. The human mind resolves or works to resolve any circumstance that threatens our existence. We're created to be able to do that. I imagine very early human beings resolving the threat, say, of a saber-toothed tiger by devising a lethal trap. We can do that. And that's what these people were trying to do to Jesus. Today, we have used our creative gifts to devise cameras that we carry around that also can instantly share those images with people around the planet. That camera, that ability, is used many times to be helpful and to connect. It can even resolve threats. Yes, and many times it is used to harm people, or it can be used to resolve what we perceive to be a threat. In any case, we can live Jesus' model of noticing the trap by rising up above it, by remembering our spiritual principles, by going within, and so discovering a new spiritual view of our life, regardless of the technology. We can use technology to kill people's spirit, not to mention physically, as is also happening. So we can use it to express God's love for every human being and our love for each other. It's not the technology, it is how we rise above it or go within to use the technology. We have to remember that God is protecting our eternal welfare, freeing us to rise above the world and notice that our perception of a threat could be the false flag of our ego, using that anxiety, that perception of a threat simply to protect itself. Now, this feels dangerous, right? To trust the unseen divine love rather than what we can buy with the coin of our ego, right? That we hold in our hands. Let us be strengthened and given courage by the memory of the blessing that comes when we open our minds and hearts to secure relationship with each other and with God. I love words and I love wordplay. For instance, I've spent a goodly amount of time analyzing the problems with the sentence, "This statement is false." It's a paradox. I confess also that a good barb that exposes a person's foolishness gives me great satisfaction. I am jealous of those who are able to make the quick, sarcastic retort, right? And I envy those whose reason is incisive, cutting to the clear sense of a convoluted argument. However, every time I catch myself in such merely naturally minded delights, I'm reminded of the deeper spiritual principle that my actual task in this life is to discern the evil or the threat or the illegitimate motivations of my thoughts and feelings. Is the person, for instance, I wish to verbally crush trying to advance themselves by lying? Or are they ignorant and can be, as it were, charitably informed? Or am I justifying some unhealthy pleasure? I haven't had a donut for a couple of weeks. Am I making myself look smart or better than others with my words? We need to note here that using humor and or sarcasm to cut someone down can never be a charitable act. It is not looking for the good in the person. It does not seek their amendment. Also, seeking to verbally harm a person, even when acting from evil and selfish motives, is always wrong. Now, I've been an advocate for the prevention of violence in multiple aspects of life for a long time. So the desire to harm someone with an excellently formed retort always catches my attention. I think I've developed such a sensitivity to humor or sarcasm that is violent that it is easy for me to hold my tongue. And that took practice, attention, and effort. All this to say that I really appreciate Jesus' response to the completely illegitimate question posed to him about the ancient laws dealing with the care of widows. He does not take the bait. He is not hooked. And he's able to do this because he has, I'm proposing, a secure attachment with his Father and with his commitment to his mission. At this moment, he is experiencing a powerful and healthy sense of self. He's not troubled by the implicit accusation by the Sadducees that he is a false prophet who does not obey the commandments of God as given through God's servant Moses thousands of years before. Rather, Jesus remains clear thinking, pointing out the errors of their application of that ancient law. Jesus is manifesting a way of being that begins in one's heart and has a clear path to verbal expression. So his heart actually aches for the woundedness of the Sadducees standing before him, that woundedness that would make them be rigid and closed-minded. I imagine they were young men, and there were no female Sadducees, young men still in the need to get it right phase of life. This way of being, described by Swedenborg and others, closes the mind to spiritual principles that would open our hearts to the flow of divine love and wisdom. Their hearts are stone, and their lips can only lie. Yet Jesus does not castigate them, as he's done to others in different circumstances. He charitably and gently surmises that they are simply ignorant of the scriptures. Jesus' clear sight and warm heart identifies the underlying truth. In this case, marriage is not a contract to produce physical offspring. It is a spiritual covenant. It is not achieved at some future time, nor is it forced upon the woman as they would understand how a woman would be given in marriage. It is a present state of joy and satisfaction in a covenantal relationship. If there's any craft in Jesus' response, it is that he cites the authority of Moses so that all know that he's not challenging the scriptures, only the misuse of them to gain and hold power over people. So I continue to seek practices that develop my curiosity about people, about the meaning of their words, especially the condition of their heart, and to notice any wounds that are behind the meaning of those words. And I want to cultivate a practice of observing myself with an objective, critical but non-judgmental eye. The task before us is to recognize our doubts and discern when they are motivated by fear, anxiety, dysfunctional thinking, disruptive feelings. We can then practice the spiritual discipline of letting go and letting God hold us safely in his arms. Even as Jesus held the spiritually wounded men in his loving care while speaking the truth. That takes practice. That's a craft that develops over time with a lot of practice. So let us all look for this path to manifesting this kind of reception of love and wisdom so that we too will have God dwelling in our hearts and minds, and so speak the truth in love. Humans are created to want this relationship. We want others to be connected to us, to align with us. Another way of saying it is that humans are created to want others to believe what they believe. We want others to love what we love. This drive for connection, for secure attachment, is implanted in humans so that by experiencing connection with other people, we feel whole and complete and safe, and will also then wish to be connected to God and the flow of life of the universe, of which we are all a part. And when a person achieves that connection itself, their life, and the life of all humans, fulfills the divine plan for creation itself. This urge to be one with God and with others is so deep and pervasive a part of our constitution. It's like the air we breathe. This explains why, if we are wounded, especially by harm or abandonment in a child, we do not automatically notice the pollution that's poisoning our thoughts and feelings. And so our fallen nature and the wounds of childhood more or less take over our mind, dividing it, so that when we seek connection, we regularly act from fear of being harmed or being left out. The gospel next tells of a good man who wanted assurance that he was on the right path of life. He wanted to join and belong. Jesus affirms this psychological need when he tells this man that he is not far from heaven. The man acknowledges that connecting with people and God through love is more fundamental, more important than any outward acts of faith. And Jesus recognizes this as being spiritually advanced. This is a beautiful, powerful image that this heaven that Jesus is talking about is not after death. It is a state of peace and mutual love and connection with all life and a shared experience of community, everything we all desire to have. And Jesus is saying we can experience this heaven here and now. Thus, I'm saying this is experiencing secure attachment. That is heaven, right? I note here that an unhealthy dependence seeks external affirmation, that you and I are the same in superficial categories. Jesus is using this man's search for an inner experience of belonging and being on the right path to affirm that we do, in fact, support each other when we affirm each other's value and support each other's inner search for peace by being present with each other. That's distinct from telling each other what to believe or simply being agreeable. And this leads to the observation I want to make about this last challenge Jesus has with people around him. In referring to ancient teachings and traditions that developed out of them, Jesus is warning those of us who wish to live a model of a spiritual secure attachment to beware the normal yet merely natural inclination to survive by acting like all other people are a threat to our life, which then impels us to seek control over other people and to put them under our authority so that they are no longer a threat. And this is what happens to every single human institution that's ever been created by humans. And so it happened over the many generations as now the scribes, perhaps naively at first, thought that such power and supremacy was the way to maintain God's order and to restore God's kingdom. And so that the Messiah would come and assert a political power and battle their enemies. They came by that belief naturally. And we can observe that it came from a lack of secure attachment and a wish to be in control. Jesus is asserting that God, whatever language you use for the source, the divine life, that it is purely spiritual love and does never itself exercises earthly political power. Spiritual love does not put anyone in second place. To expect the Messiah to make one nation supreme over all others is a diminution of God's universal love, making merely power the most important, and so subverting God's mission. For the scribes, then listening to Jesus, so this is a radical change of mind from thinking naturally to thinking spiritually. Jesus is modeling this transformation, and he's inviting us all into it. He asks us to do a systematic and ongoing observation of both the source and the outcome of our words and actions in order to notice when we are thinking naturally rather than spiritually. If we are serious about being human beings, acquiring all the benefits of being securely attached, if we choose to model ourselves after Jesus, if we wish to have a trusting, loving relationship with God and with other people, then we need to vigorously call ourselves out when we use our knowledge, our craft, our reason to gain supremacy in any way.
I pray this has supported your transformative life, whatever practice you have in your life. I want to thank Solomon Keel for his music, and I want to invite you to make a contribution to this work if you wish and are able through the PayPal link. And I invite you to continue to listen to the next episode. You be well.